Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Thursday, May the 8th, 2025, and today we're going to talk about the if money were no issue garden fence, starting a nonprofit farm, and can you correct drainage next to a tunnel if your first attempt doesn't really work well enough. So let's do it. All right, Merry Thursday, everyone. Yesterday, I got my weekly round of starts going. I start about 2 beds worth of lettuce and like a half of a bed of romaine lettuce every week, along with some cilantro and green leaf lettuce. And I'll do that all the way through August. At that point, I start going back down to like 2 beds worth every 2 weeks because we will start to get second cuttings by the end of September, plus growth and sales and farmers slow down around that time. I also got the cucumbers started again to try and graft them again because the first round was a failure because I'm a dummy and I rushed it. So that's fun. But figuring out how, these sort of lo-fi ways to do these high level horticultural things is kind of my MO. So I promise to screw this up absolutely as many times as it takes. That's what I'm here for, I think. I'm also notably slightly more tired this morning than usual because the family and I headed up to see our local soccer team, Lou City FC, take on an MLS team, Minnesota United, last night for what is called the U.S. Open Cup, a kind of tournament that is somewhat unique to soccer where anyone in the U.S. can enter a team. I mean, sort of. So we could put together a no-till growers team and enter if we were good enough and win enough games. We could theoretically also eventually play an MLS team. In this tournament, it would be like your local bar's baseball team getting to play the Yankees one day. No one does tournaments quite like soccer. It's just the best. Anyway, I got in late, but I also got to sleep a little bit later because I was all prepared for this show. Clearly, it all vaguely balances out. All right, so as has become the tradition for our Thursdays, we use our Thursdays to get caught up on our Patreon questions for the people who truly do make this show possible, you Patreon members. So today's first Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Lee Kossab, who writes, quote, if you had a decent amount of capital to put into a garden fence, what would your ideal fence be for keeping out deer, rabbits, and other critters? We have a ton of deer and rabbit pressure in our area. In your videos, it looks like you just have Premier One netting around your garden. Is that enough? Seems like deer could jump right over that. I've had a herd of deer decimate a smaller backyard garden in a night. If you could build your ideal market garden fence around your entire garden, what would it be like? Thanks for being awesome, end quote. Okay, so thanks, Lee. And if you all ever want to lob some hypotheticals like this at me, Patreon members, then go for it. I love this stuff, and feel free to join me in what would you do? What would your ultimate garden fence look like? For me, for starters, our fencing works okay. It's not just the netting that you saw. It's actually, I'll explain it in a second, but the deer pressure here is pretty low because we're in a somewhat of a neighborhood, to be honest, and the neighbors let their dogs basically run the place. Although in a drought, deer will become a menace, and I see evidence of them hanging around. They rarely do any damage to our garden, especially in the spring, because they just have so much more to eat elsewhere. And again, dogs. But what we basically have is like your classic fence, woven wire. It's about 4 feet tall. And then above that, we have 3 electrifiable wires that maybe stands like 7 feet tall. The wires are electrified. It's kind of, using one of those Premier One energizers. And it's frankly kind of ugly, but it is affordable. Of course, I would prefer something slightly more aesthetically pleasing. I don't mind the look of tall deer fencing, for instance, tightly constructed with large wooden posts. More to your question, if budget were not an issue, that's probably what I would go to. I would definitely go up to 8 feet high, or actually, I may even go up to 9 feet high. Why 9? That bottom foot, and again, I'm working with a big budget here, would be a single foot of woven wire fence that would be attached to a hinge that would basically lift up the entire bottom of the fence, probably in sections, but so that I could lift up that entire bottom of the fence and then weed whack underneath it to keep it clean. The fencing material and hinges would have to be strong enough to pull up through some grass. So maybe a sliding mechanism or something would make more sense. And the hinges would have to lock down so stuff couldn't just push through them. But anyway, I would just like some mechanism that would make it easier to clean underneath of the fences, especially when you have grass and vines and all sorts of stuff growing up through it. And then, of course, it would have to be a really tight weave on that bottom part of the fence so that rabbits couldn't squeeze through. So that's the basics of my ideal fence. But if I'm allowed to completely take this ultimate deer fence idea and run with it, I would definitely install some birdhouses on probably every single post, with maybe every third post being 20 feet tall with a bat box or like a box for the purple martins. I would also have some areas for insect habitat along the fences as well. Near every garden plot would be a miniature shed for tools built into the fence to keep them out of the rain, but nearby wherever I'm gardening. Depending on the size of the garden, I might also have some easy rollout mechanism for shade cloth, so I could literally pull it from one side to the other side of the garden and just latch it onto the other side of the fence, if I needed, like in the middle of the summer or something, and then just roll it back up and it would just stay on the fence. Maybe I would have a way to do that same thing for tomato and cucumber trellising, just pull the line straight across the fencing. Heck, you could really get wild with this idea if we're not there already, and have an irrigation line running the length of the fence so it's never on the ground and you just kind of tap into it directly from the fence line wherever you need it. For me, I feel like fences are definitely wasted opportunities and expenses, though it would be hard for most people to justify adding even one of these ideas, let alone all of them, but a boy can dream. Anyway, what would you all install, both affordable and ridiculous, if you could? What is your dream garden fence? Let us know. Fun question, and we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, how and if to start a nonprofit farm. BRB. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Ring of Fire. What if you could turn your brush problem into black gold? The Ring of Fire Biochar Kiln is your spring tool for soil transformation, converting woody debris into high-quality biochar in just hours. Biochar will kickstart your compost, retain water and nutrients in your soil, and provide habitat for beneficial microbes. Now $19.95 with flat rate shipping. Their spring sale runs through June. Don't wait to boost your soil and optimize your inputs. Visit ringofire.earth/growers now to learn more. Also, for more information on biochar, check out the No-Till Market Garden podcast interview with Kelpie Wilson, inventor of the Ring of Fire kiln, that we will link in the show notes. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions now. Today's second Patreon question comes from Patreon member IB Taylor 12, who writes, quote, "Hi, Jesse. I'm wondering about the process for forming a nonprofit. Some friends and I are in the very beginning stages of discussing a cooperatively owned farm. One of the aspects of this farm would be to grow food for places like hospitals, schools, and community food banks. We think that the nonprofit would be the best status for us given our desired market, and also we want the land to be in a trust as farmland commons. We got inspired by listening to the Collaborative Farming podcast with Jackson and the folks from Farmers Land Trust. Great episode. We'll link that in the show notes. Can you share a bit about your experience of forming the 501c3 for no-till growers? How did you even start? What did you find challenging or not obvious before going through the process yourself? Thank you for all the time and energy that you and now Mike put into creating this high quality program each day." End quote. Okay, awesome question. Thank you. So I would be lying if I said I handled even a small percentage of that transition. Jackson took care of almost all of like the paperwork and everything. But one of the big challenges for us was less so starting a nonprofit and more so converting an existing business into a nonprofit. If you're starting from scratch, your work is probably going to be significantly simpler and perhaps faster. It took us around a year to fully convert, not including the paperwork Jackson had to do. Though that doesn't necessarily mean it'll be easier for you, and that it will still rely on approval from the IRS, and we don't know what the future of nonprofits are right now. One obligatory thing here is that I'm going to talk a bit about nonprofits, but obviously I'm by no means a nonprofit expert, so just take my thoughts as a starting point, not a full-fledged guide. First, it should be said that starting a nonprofit has to be treated like starting any business. Write a business plan, do your market research, all of it, but because you are wanting to start this organization with other people, you also need to all get together and start work on your own individual holistic goals, as well as creating your business plan. Communication is going to be absolutely essential, and it may be worth taking a nonviolent communications course together. I mean, it may be worth it for literally everyone in the world to do. But especially if you are planning on working together, startup capital is also going to be an important factor. And although there are ways to structure a nonprofit in such a way that the initial capital is viewed as a loan that you could be repaid for, that will require careful construction and consideration. You would have to consult a lawyer who specializes in nonprofits for that. And frankly, once you have the business plan and individual holistic goals established, that is when you would want to hire on a nonprofit lawyer to consult with for getting all the details laid out and knowing what each and every step looks like to maximize your chances of getting nonprofit status while also protecting the members. I should also emphasize that the market research will be critical here, just like it is with any business. Have you spoken with the hospitals, the schools, the community food banks? Do you know if they have a need? If they have any funds to offer, what their budget looks like for this sort of stuff. You will also really need to consider your operational funding sources, especially with federal grants being basically non-existent right now and people holding fast to their wallets in preparation for a likely recession. How will this nonprofit sustain itself and its employees? You will have to establish a board, so get together a list of folks you would want to be on it, which can include some employees. There are some rules attached to that in terms of what they can and can't vote on, like their own salary, for instance. Then, of course, is all about the normal farming stuff that needs to be figured out, like land, water, amendments, etc. For us, since we already had our funding worked out for the most part, that side of things was simple because we didn't need the nonprofit status to access certain funding. We just hoped it would help us access funding that a for-profit business struggles to access, from large donors to certain grants, etc. It's also a long-term commitment in a way that for-profit business is not, because you can't just build a company, sell the company, and cash in. The assets the nonprofit acquires in its life belong to the government, generally speaking. But what it can do is provide income for many years. So for us, it was less about designing a nonprofit than taking what was a for-profit company that was already acting like a nonprofit. Remember, we give all of our info away for free. So effectively, we could just rely heavily on a nonprofit lawyer to lay out exactly what we needed to do and then do that. In that way, our transition was relatively straightforward, I guess. But also in other ways, proving that we weren't just trying to game the system somehow was a little bit harder. Anyway, I hope that's helpful, and I also hope to be getting some more collaborative farming stuff together in the near future. We'll see. Having Mike on board is an absolutely huge help, and it's quite a big step towards being able to do more with the show, with my time. Having your support through Patreon is how we are able to afford all that, though, so thank you. You all rock. All right, we're going to take one more quick break, and when we come back, drainage beside the tunnels. Be right back. Today's episode is also brought to you by Farmhand. I started a CSA to grow food and build community, not to drown in admin work. Spreadsheets, emails, and pack lists take up too much time. If I could spend less time at my desk and more in the field, that'd be a win. Enter Farmhand. Farmhand automates billing, newsletters, websites, and member support, saving CSA farmers 20 plus hours a week. Focus on farming, not paperwork. See how Farmhand can help. Book a one-on-one demo with founder Ari at farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. Today's episode is also brought to you by FarmRaise. Still using QuickBooks for your farm's bookkeeping? You're wasting time and losing money. Farm finances can be overwhelming, but they don't have to be. FarmRaise Tracks is the all-in-one tool built just for farmers. Manage expenses, prep for taxes, run payroll, and plan for the future without spreadsheets or stress. Just clear, organized insights to keep your operation thriving. Thousands of farmers trust Tracks to make smart financial decisions all year long. It's time you did too. Use code NOTIL20, that's all caps, no spaces, NOTIL20 for 20% off the life of your membership at farmraise.com. All right, back to the show. All right, our last Patreon question of the day comes to us from Andrew and Haley Keeler from Avoda Sustainable Acres, who writes, quote, "Hi, Jesse. I was wondering what your thoughts for effective drainage alongside hoop houses. I try to utilize space by growing close to hoop houses with a trenched waterway between the bed and the hoop house. I have used mostly landscape fabric after trenching the waterway to hold back erosion and to manage weeds. However, the freezing and thawing combined with the wind pulls them up every year. I also have to pull them back and retrench as mole activity and some erosion start to flatten out the waterways Any thoughts? I am hesitant to use stone, as any attempt to reshape the waterway would be a nightmare. Maybe what I have been doing is the best method, but it seems like there should be a more effective way that allows growing close with not much continual maintenance. Thanks for what you do. End quote. All right, great questions here. And something that I feel like I have not done well in the construction of literally any of our tunnels, and therefore have developed some strong thoughts on how I would do it again, is the drainage. First, I feel the pain with the landscape fabric. Our last farm had that between the tunnels, which themselves were on a bit of a slope, and it sort of worked, but I had to pull it up every fall. Top 10 least favorite farm tasks is dealing with landscape fabric that has been down for a season, by the way, and then clean all the weeds out or clean it up or whatever, and then lay that landscape fabric back down. I hated that. I have almost no landscape fabric down at the new farm, and although it's a bit more mowing and weed whacking, it's a lot less cussing, so that's good. But for you, by the way you describe it, the only additional option that makes sense to me beyond rocks, I think, would be maybe like drainage tile. And it's not my favorite thing to bury plastic, especially not right next to plants that you're wanting to grow. But if you could just dig that trench slightly deeper, it would not be too hard to install. Plus, moles would not be able to mess with the sort of levelness of it anymore. Then you can maybe just keep that area mowed like a lawn. But of course, you said it would be a nightmare to reshape that space. So perhaps that would not be an option. Now, you also said the wind does a number on it every season, which itself could be solved by burying the most exposed part of that fabric. You also could potentially look at like straw or hay mulch because, unlike something like wood chips, if you put a mulch down there, obviously with all that water running off the sides of the tunnel, it's just going to wash it away. But something like hay or straw actually would probably stay in place, at least for the most part. So that could also be an option. So in short, there is no perfect answer that requires no maintenance that isn't just, concrete. The rocks may be a close second, but the expense and time would be a lot of work. Next would probably be the drainage tile. I know that's not the most helpful answer, but the reality is that, like it is for me, if drainage is not fully mastered before the tunnel installation, it's always going to be either a big job to fix it or a big nuisance to live with it. One other perhaps less obvious way to deal with it is installing gutters on the house to move the excessive water elsewhere so that you don't have to worry so much about that space beside the tunnel in terms of like building some new drainage. The gutters would have to be removed in the winter for snow though, so some amount of drainage would, probably still have to be managed at least during that period. Anyway, maybe there is a sprinkling of an idea in there. Otherwise, I think that's it for this Thursday. Don't forget, No Till Growers is now officially a 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and/or follow wherever you are getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and the team at No Till Growers. Also shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook or the Seed Farmer at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of May, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Hood Family Farm and Andy's Bucket Garden. We're getting a lot of farm signups. This is great. So continuing our story. So Kate has a group of strangers standing in the dining room sipping delicious lentil soup and trying to figure out how they got where they are when Kate has a confession to make because Kate has kind of put it all together. It's 1974, Kate says. I'm at CBGB's watching the Ramones in New York City, and they're playing Blitzkrieg Bop, and I just look around and I see everyone nodding and listening, and I just feel incredibly relaxed and free in that moment and at peace with the world. And then all of a sudden, I woke up here in North Yorkshire about 50 years ago, and I've been stuck here ever since through 2 different wars, and honestly, I kind of love it. Why didn't you go back? The group asks, and Kate holds up, the spoon and says, clearly the lentil soup, that's easy. But also, I didn't want to go back, but there may be a way that you can, and that's for tomorrow on how punk rock changed history. Yep. All right. Thanks for watching and/or listening. We will see you tomorrow for Feedback Friday, also just known as Friday. Bye.
Time is precious, and so are our pets. So time with our pets is extra precious. That's why we started Dutch. Dutch provides 24/7 access to licensed vets, with unlimited virtual visits and follow-ups for up to 5 pets. You can message a vet at any time and schedule a video visit the same day. Our vets can even prescribe medication for many ailments, and shipping is always free. With Dutch, you'll get more time with your pets and year-round peace of mind when it comes to their vet care.